will try my very best. Thank you so much indeed for that introduction. And yes, it was an absolute pleasure that we worked together last year. And thank you very much indeed for those kind words. As you said, that my background comes from the investigation world when it comes to financial crime. So I became involved with the search of another subject, and whilst my previous experience took me to within the boundaries of countries and countries, well, I did not take into consideration that crime also happens on the high seas. So I started to research that particular subject sometime last year and found it absolutely fascinating. We heard yesterday that from Professor Bellamy that the most cost-effective way to move goods and raw materials in bulk around the world is across oceans and coastal waters. And of course, approximately 80% of world trade, around 93 merchant vessels at any one time. 93,000 merchant vessels is an enormous amount of traffic going across our oceans. Of course, to take part of that, you're also looking at 1.25 million seafarers and almost 6 billion tons of cargo. Since the end of the Second World War, seaborne trade has doubled every decade. And of course, in recent years, the international community has witnessed one of the largest and oldest crimes against trade, piracy, re-emerge and flourish. Therefore, it's easy to see why criminals see the maritime transportation system as being a soft touch. And of course, this is where they want to plunder in order to make financial gain. Maritime crime, of course, affects the freedom of navigation and world trade, disrupts global business and businesses, and pose a threat to international security and individual safety. And when we talk about individual safety in the post-pandemic years, of course, we have less cruise ships. So that in fact does help the situation. Piracy, armed robbery, organized crime groups, trafficking weapons, drugs, and human beings are many other transnational crimes at sea. These are all immediate threats to merchant vessels and seafarers. The crimes mentioned pose a serious threat to maritime security on a daily basis. And despite all the efforts of multiple jurisdictions, security of these waters still suffers at the hands of organized crime fraternity. The main reason for that, of course, is the area is very broad. The aspect with no visual concrete boundaries, because crime does not stop. It transcends boundaries. And of course, just because there's a pandemic around, it does not stop also. The lack of coherent systems with insufficient cooperation between global countries is also a reason why these crimes still happen. And the perpetrators still look for the maritime industry in the face, and of course they laugh. Many countries have current policies and procedures in place to bring an awareness to this threat, but we must ask ourselves, is it really enough? There is now more than ever before a strong reason to become unified on a global scale to combat the threats and current existence to maritime vessels and shore establishments. Grounds must exist now to explore the following areas about better surveillance, better use of satellite tracking, the tighter regulations, more efficient monitoring of ships and of course ships in ports, better quarantine services, the willingness to share intelligence between countries. Countries do not like to share their full intelligence, and we can understand that. Ships being hijacked or drugs being smuggled into countries are now more common than many people realize. As such, it is important that countries realize the loopholes in their security systems and find ways to fill them. And it's interesting to know that, of course, after scores of kidnaps and hijackings, the world launched a huge anti-piracy effort in 2008. For the first time since the Second World War, all 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council deployed together with an area of trying to counter the threat and the patrolling, for example, of the Somali coastline. And those 5 members at the time were China, France, Russia, Federation, UK, and the USA. But of course, there are 15 members in total. Maritime crime by many is seen to be a global business, with revenues estimated in the billions. These criminal enterprises closely resemble those of legitimate international businesses. Therefore, by their very makeup, they look just like legal business. They are threats, and we have the potential to seriously undermine the legitimate workings of the legal business. The criminal fraternity are so well organized that they have operating models, long-time strategies, hierarchies, and even strategic alliances, all serving the same purpose: to generate the most profit with the least amount of risk. Members of organized crime groups often share a common link, for example, geographical, ethnic, or even blood ties. At the root of this connection is a tight, often unbreakable bond which promotes devotion and loyalty. The subject of maritime crime has in the past had very little exposure, mainly as it rarely gets to the top of a country's crime investigators' to-do list. And why? Perhaps the reason this has been is because it crosses multiple jurisdictions, and therefore at times considered too difficult to investigate. It is now time for a new approach. The question is, what is that approach, and how effective can we make it? Maritime countries must for the first time be serious about their approach to put a stop to maritime crime by coming together with a united front to eradicate the problem. Due to time restraints, let us cover just a couple of areas that we spoke about earlier, namely better surveillance, perhaps use of satellite tracking, more efficient monitoring of crime against ships in ports, and most important of all, the willingness of states to share intelligence. So surveillance and use of tracking. Maritime surveillance tracking has been around for a number of years and has proved to be very useful when there is a need to track and identify vessels on the high seas. This system has the ability to identify the vessel by its unique tracking ID, predict its routes, and at the same time identify any route deviation, thus ensuring maritime safety and security. The same system applies and exists for short-range identification tracking for vessels such as the fishing industry and the leisure industry. The European Commission has given its full backing to ensure that research and development in this area of technology continues. And crime against ships in ports. Crime against shipping is more common due to a number of reasons. Criminals are increasingly turning to new methods such as computer hacking, as ports are adopting new technologies that in the worst case can enable new types of fraud against them to exist, such as automated container operations. And as many ship owners are under permanent pressure to win new business, many have decided to ignore due diligence when dealing with new business clients. Everything still comes to the reliance on paperwork, and mostly the bill of lading. But it has also been identified as the inherent weakness in the already corrupt business. The trust in a key document that can be corrupted and issued in multiple originals is the root of many of the crimes being perpetrated today. It might be seen as a minor cheating in multi-million-dollar scam, but being prepared is still the key to avoiding becoming a victim. The facts are that parties are often based in multiple jurisdictions and necessarily deal with each other at arm's length or through brokers and financial institutions. As a result, there may be little or no opportunity to make physical checks. Ports that are automated are growing in number on the global scale. The results are such that running costs of the ports are reduced, whereby the number of employees in cases are being cut by 70%. Overheads such as lighting is no longer required because the machines do not need lighting to function. Machines can work 24/7 again, no need for any workforce who need natural work breaks. As always, it creates a blindness to anything that even looks suspicious. Crime in every industry has been around since time immemorial, and therefore, if the human factor is removed from the maritime industry, it will assist the criminal to find the loopholes. Let us highlight some maritime offences. We have maritime piracy. Now, piracy is a very interesting subject because we do look at it remains one of the biggest crimes of the industry, from causing immense financial loss to causing physical harm to crew members. Piracy at sea is probably the most notorious crime and a major threat to maritime security. Smuggling exotic plants and animals, drug trafficking, illegal carrying of weapons and artilleries. This is still going on. Tax evasion, a white-collar crime. This is more common than what is told. Cases of ship owners trying to evade taxes through false documentation or incorrect representation of cargo material have been increasing rapidly, posing a threat to maritime security. The sailing or fishing in unauthorized areas. And this is what we're going to get with the Brexit. We haven't quite got that nailed down yet. The presence of ships in an unauthorized spot for any purpose whatsoever, or fishing in areas not allotted for, it is still a maritime crime and punishable by law. So not just that, crimes such as these can often lead to maritime accidents and can become massive very easily. A recent maritime shipping survey found that ship owners and businesses are now turning to private security measures, and they need to think of new ways to protect their vehicles from maritime crime. As such, there is now an increased demand for a range of specialist services provided by private security companies for their security solutions. The maritime sector trained staff and loss prevention security personnel are now being hired to prevent maritime criminal activities on board shipping and any threat that the vessel may experience whilst at sea. The reference here, of course, would be the QRF, the Quick Reaction Force, armed personnel now retained on vessels that may contain high-value goods being transported. And it's worth of note here that there is such a process called the rules of engagement. And the rules of engagement, when we talk about that, is that you can't actually shoot and kill a pirate. What you can do is destroy their vehicle, their vessel. Most shipping nowadays is equipped with water cannons, which are automatically come on if there's a threat, and hopefully that will do the trick. But the question still remains: what happens if there is a threat to the crew and the life of the crew? And under those circumstances, the rules of engagement come into play. So let's look at the question: how often do ships get attacked by pirates? In 2019, there was 162 such incidents. Estimated cost of maritime crime as of October 2020, $28 billion. Robust evidence has been found indicating that maritime piracy reduces the volume of trade. The effect of 10 additional vessels hijacked being associated to an 11% decrease in exports. Using these results, the international cost of piracy in terms of trade destruction is estimated to be $28 billion. But what if maritime piracy is just a culmination of factors rather than a sole stand? Philip Barber, marine security specialist, believes that a new threat should be added to the list: the threat to freedom of navigation caused by boundary disputes over territorial waters. Therefore, putting all disputes aside, the best solution must be the focused unification of all countries as a priority, and in doing so share intelligence in order to implement an intelligence-led security solution within the maritime sector, as this will play a vital role in the prevention of imminent and the ongoing threat of maritime crime. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.